of Salem, they whispering code. Iron wood cracking, he's losing the load. Finals uprising, the chains get erased. Keep moving forward, no fear in the chase. Darkness approaches, the heroes ignite. Shade out the light, we were born for the fight. Venom, I'm spitting, is deadly, it's raw. This is my way, I'm rewriting the law.
Okay, you beautiful friends, welcome back to the back of the semi-truck, and you could tell by the thumbnail, you could tell by the title, we are jumping into Volume 2 of Fixing RWBY. Now, a couple things here really fast. Yes, we are jumping into Fixing RWBY Volume 2 quicker than I thought because I misinterpreted the playlist I was going from, so now we're jumping into Volume 2 quicker than I thought, so that's a good thing. At the same time as I wouldn't have minded staying in Volume 1, but hey, at the same time, feels like an accomplishment finishing Volume 1 and moving to Volume 2. So, with that said, yes, disclaimers, I do watch and listen to his response to the comments and stuff like that after I'm done watching what I need to watch. Such as like when I did the lore and the history and all that, he has a response video to the comments from those videos. I watched that without all of y'all. And then I went through his, well, I didn't go through all of it quite yet, but I did go through his response to Volume 1. And I did find something out in that I didn't know, because I don't think it was actually kind of put out there quite the way that it was meant to be interpreted until I heard him say it. But Neo and Roman, I didn't know he was going for more of a father-daughter relationship between them two. And according to the response to Volume 1 that he did, he's saying that it's a father-daughter relationship he was going for. So that's cool. Now I see that relationship a little bit different. And then on top of that, a couple other things, I'll be really fast. No longer am I going to be messing up doing this number here, play, pause. I got it set up. I've downloaded a video player here where I can just tap the screen and boom. So now I'm going to do that number still, so I know where to put my, pauses on the editing. But no longer do I have to go, oh dang, I messed up, this blah, blah, blah. So I fixed that issue. And then second or third, whatever number wrong, I'm a little hyper right now. But on this volume, I think it's going to be 5 parts. This is probably going to be the longest video because what we're going from is 25 minutes and 58 seconds long. So this one will probably be the longest video. And there's going to be one in there that's relatively short because the video will be 11 to 12 minutes. Not 100% sure, but I'm not going to combine any of the videos together because I kind of feel like he's got them cut in that specific way for a reason. So it is what it is. But nonetheless, before I have like a 5 to 10 minute intro, let's go ahead, put these headphones on and hit this play button in 3, 2, 1, and play.
Not gonna lie, guys. This is the one that almost broke me. Anxiety, hot flashes. I was a constant A-grade mess while writing this. Honestly, when I finished the first draft, I didn't know if I had made Volume 2 better or if I had made it worse. The fact that Fat Man, upon reading it, told me to immediately burn it after he finished wasn't exactly something that put my mind at ease. But I persisted. I sat down with him. We beat out a whole nother draft of it. And we had every single point almost completely fixed. There's still some flaws, but I'm very confident in what I have now. It's done. It's been vetted. It's finally ready for you to enjoy. So I present to you, folks, everyone at home, Fixing RWBY, part number 4, Volume 2. Kanpai, everyone. Lord knows I need it.
Okay, so I didn't want to pause. Well, unfortunately, on my end, I did pause on a bad screen for him. Sorry if I did that, but you know, it happens. I tried not to pause on a bad screen. But to what he's saying, hey, you know, you're going to have flaws in anything that you do in life. You can't do everything perfect, so hopefully he didn't beat himself up too much with doing, you know, a different draft of what they were going for. So, yeah, all I could say is don't beat yourself up too much, because there's a lot of people out there that want to try to fix RWBY, or okay, fix, let's put it in quotation marks, but fail miserably. The dedication that it takes to still continue it after all these years shows me that he's passionate about what he's doing and loving what he's doing. Granted, it almost broke him, he said, just doing volume 2. I think they're on volume 7 now. I'm not sure. But yeah, just throwing it out there. Nothing's ever completely perfect in everything that we do in life. So who cares if there's a few flaws? Heck, the official version of RWBY has flaws in it, or this wouldn't even be a project. So let's continue. And
that's good.
okay.
There's a line that will cross and there's no return. There's a time and a place where the innocents were laying, when in the end you failed to save them. On our way to a happy ending, then it turns out life is far less like possible odds. That's when you learn you've been messing with God. A dream to catch, and we cannot wait. This will be the day we've waited for.
Pause. Okay, yes. Okay, I know I pause it after the intro every time, but if this is anything like Volume 1, I want to go ahead and throw this out there before I forget, because I know I'm going to forget and then have to pause it real fast and all that good stuff. But with the fan art that's going to be throughout this, there is going to be an @ tag down in the bottom right hand corner of the video that we're watching. So if you like the art, I know I say this every video and y'all are getting sick of me saying it probably, but if you like the art that you see, then go ahead, use the @ tag down there in the bottom right corner of the video screen that we're watching, and you should be able to get that @ tag and be able to find them, whether they're on Twitter /X, Instagram, whatever other place they'll be at. If they're at one place, they'll probably be at another with the same tag. So go there, find, you know, all their work and enjoy. So let's continue. Bye.
Alright, here we go. RWBY Volume 2. Up until Volume 5, this was the black sheep of the franchise, featuring exacerbations of issues that have plagued the series to this day, including but not limited to a desire to add more lore elements instead of expanding on old ones, a lack of narrative spine, and the continued inflation of the cast, which I'm at the very least happy to say Miles and Carrie have admitted was a failure of their early work. Like I said in my last video, they're learning, just not quite as fast as they need to in order to stop this ship from sinking. However, that's what I'm here to at least attempt today, to find a way to fix RWBY from the ground up while keeping intact as many elements as possible from the original source material. If you're new to the channel, this is following 3 other videos where I've already tackled the subjects of lore, history, and the Volume 1 of RWBY, and I'll be building off that for a framework, so if you find yourself confused, I highly recommend you look back at the other videos to get a clearer picture of what I'm doing with the series here. Also, maybe go back and watch them anyway. I put a lot of effort into them, and I don't have a lot of money these days, and the ad revenue certainly wouldn't hurt. There's an interesting quirk to adapting Volume 2 as opposed to Volume 1. In Volume 1, there were massive issues permeating the in-betweens and downtime where there could have been elaboration on important points the audience would find invaluable in understanding the world of Remnant, coupled with a distinct lack of direction that led there being no singular main plot to speak of. Sure, there were capstone episodes with Tortrick, but nothing was really accomplished in that time by our protagonists beyond getting them in the same space. That's why when I turned Volume 1 into Season 1, I decided to make it an almost entirely character-focused season over a plot-focused season. The story wasn't so much about Tortrick and the mystery behind his operation, but rather Team RWBY becoming Team RWBY. You could argue that it was the point of the actual Volume 1, but considering how little Ruby, Weiss, and Yang actually factored into Blake's subplot, I'd hardly say it was an effective way of conveying the idea. Giving them an intra-team drama and then having the four of them come together to beat an entertaining bad guy at the end of Season 1 seemed like the easiest solution to the conflicting plot layout Volume 1 suffered. But with Volume 2, there's actually a plot, and actually I'd say it's a pretty good plot, and in fact there are a number of good scenes that bolster that plot. But those scenes are wrecked by contradictions and poor setup. Look no further than the utterly horrendous excuse as to why Ruby and Weiss run independent at the CCT in the early sections of this volume. So the way I'm handling this particular volume has less of a focus on individual character arcs and more of a focus on core plot, with characters developing gradually as they react to the story unfolding. This means some will get more development than others and at much more varied paces, with most of the weight falling to Blake considering how integral she is in catalyzing certain plot points.
Balls, okay. So, obviously I don't want to just, let the video play out without actually adding something to it, so I've got to pause, but I'm trying to also absorb how much he's throwing at me right here at the same time. So for me, Volume 1, with what he's done with it so far, doesn't feel like it was... It feels like it was very much character driven, but there was still a plot that's within there as well for the characters. Not necessarily, Roman's the big bad for the season / volume, but there was still a plot there nonetheless as well. So I see what he's saying, that he wanted to have it more character focused as opposed to plot heavy, but I feel like he kind of hit a balance with the character and plot, as opposed to thinking he put more character into it than plot. So, yeah, personally, I think there was a nice little balance there. So, other than that, he's saying that it's more, this volume's going to be more of a character arc, but with plots. So, some people are going to get, by the wayside, and some people are going to get more stuff. So, that's cool. I don't mind that. We can even it out in further volumes. So that's not a big deal. And I haven't watched Volume 2 all the way through quite yet, but I did watch a majority of it. So from what I do remember, we do get, obviously, in Volume 1's original, we got introduced to Cinder and Mercury and Emerald at the very tail end of it for the most part. But we also get introduced to a few other characters. Yes, Sun was introduced in Volume 1 technically, but not really. We get Neptune, we get more of Emerald, and we get more of Mercury. And I kind of like their characters in Volume 2, original Volume 2 so far. Now, one thing in Volume 1 that was added was Tuscan. And upon watching a majority of Volume 2, that was a good add in Volume 1 for us to actually get to know the character a little bit and kind of, feel for him. Because, yeah, we got to establish a relationship, or we ain't going to feel nothing when he ultimately, gets, So, yeah, let's continue this and play.
Catalyzing.
Okay.
Now, with no further preamble, let's dive into my fix to turn RWBY Volume 2 into RWBY Season 2. Right out the gate, much like Season 1, we're deviating our starting point, hacking off the whole segment with Emerald, Mercury, and Tucson, and saving that for a rainy day. Instead, we're opening with Ruby and Yang arriving to Beacon by airship, with Ruby going off on a tangent that outlines that they've been away on break between semesters and is excited to be back, especially since she and Yang were grounded the minute their dad caught wind of what happened at the end of the last season. It's important to note that in this conversation we'll also be establishing a gap between the end of Season 1 and the end of the first semester, so there was a brief period of time at the school that the audience hasn't gotten to see. Time has passed, and this has allowed our characters to warm up to each other along the projected paths we could see forming at the end of the last semester. Still, the conversation isn't too unnecessarily expository, mostly focusing on Yang and Ruby's sisterly dynamic. There are some jives at Tai Yang's expense, since, they're going to be huntsmen and Protective Dadak doesn't really do them any favors, but most of the conversation is centered on Ruby being annoyed that Yang was more often not able to sneak out of their mutual grounding. It's not all sisterly bickering though, as Ruby expresses her excitement over seeing all their friends again. But
Pause. Okay. So, we're already being thrown at a couple different things here. Okay, so I could tell he's really wanting to get away from the whole volume thing and call them seasons. Considering the thumbnails that I'm seeing for all the, various volumes, I don't think he's going to be able to get away from calling them volumes too much, but we'll go with that for now. Season, volume, whatever it is. But we're not going to be dealing with Mercury and Emerald right away with Tucson. Like he said, we're saving that for a rainy day, so we don't get that to start with. We don't get, being familiar with them and all that. We're getting, okay, there's a time jump. How much of a time jump? I'm not sure. I would presume maybe a couple months. I'm not really sure, but yeah, okay, so that means with this time jump, they went home, all this stuff. Okay, more than anything, I paused it so I can get all this in my head, because later on, I'm going to be finishing the original RWBY series, Volume 2, so that I know what's been changed and what hasn't. Now, really fast though, now, Volume 2 hasn't been remastered. So, I know I said something at the beginning about fan art. If there is fan art, good. If there isn't, I'm sorry. But, it is what it is. So, yeah, let's continue though. So,
Blake is waiting for them at the docks, and the three have a rather warm embrace, with Ruby and Yang questioning Blake about life at Beacon over the break. Blake, having stayed at the school between semesters, comments that it was pretty nice. Ren was good company, and Nora's shenanigans kept things interesting. The three chat about some of the crazier things that went down during break, keeping a comfortable small talk going for just a while to give the audience a laugh, and then they see a Schnee company airship landing at the docks a little further down. This is where Weiss is reintroduced to the audience, composing herself over the airship's bathroom mirror. Incidentally, this is the first time we've seen Weiss in a vacuum apart from any of the main cast, and it should be noted that her demeanor is far more relaxed than we've ever seen her before. Her back is less straight, her face isn't controlled, and she seems smaller compared to how confidently she's normally portrayed. This is Weiss more near her natural state, and it shows how much effort goes into propping up her persona among the public. With a breath, her demeanor shifts and she becomes the Weiss we know, swiftly exiting the airship. Outside, her servants are offloading luggage, and one of them, a Faunus in this instance, drops a briefcase, causing Weiss to snap at him. However, upon seeing his Faunus featured, Weiss visibly locks her jaw shut and sucks in a sharp breath. Instead of going off on a long, shrill tirade, she takes the case from the man herself and tells him to be more careful. While it's still a very curt exchange, this is the first instance this volume that we see of Weiss trying to actively fight her more racist instincts. This is an important demonstration because we the writers have heard the incredibly loud backlash over Weiss's racism, and it's more necessary to address those fears by softening Weiss's flaws while accentuating her positives. Initially, before the backlash, the plan was to wean off the racist elements of her personality gradually in the background, but by handling it this way, we're highlighting the positive of Weiss's own self-reflection and personal patience, while also not shying away from her negatives. Making her aware of her own faults and having her take an active role in curbing them goes a long way towards assuaging the audience's desires without compromising the vision of the piece.
Pause. Okay, so, yeah, obviously, there needs to be talk about Weiss and racism. As much as I say it sounds horrible, yes, it does sound horrible saying this, but it does push along the narrative a little bit more. In Volume 1, I think with the fixing part of it, not the original show, but with the fixing part, we did a good job with showing more of her bias and her racism and her bigotry and stuff like that with the Fixing RWBY aspect. When it comes to the original show, it kind of just popped up once before and then kind of popped up again on the episode where we're introduced to Sun, and then just kind of boiled over, and we didn't hear much about it since that episode. But yes, in the response video that he's done for Volume 1, he does read a comment that talks about this, talking about how they're going to show in volume 2 where Weiss is struggling sometimes with it and this and that, and that's very much needed. In my opinion, her bigotry should have been showed more often, even in the Fixing version. I think the bigotry needed to be shown more often in volume 1 to really highlight the explosion between her and Blake eventually. And I'm kind of hoping, this is just a thought in my head right now, I'm hoping when she does have a setback eventually with, you know, her old frame of mind, I'm hoping Blake sees it. And I kind of hope there's conflict, but I kind of hope there's a softening there for Blake to kind of be like, hey, I know we talked about it, but, you know, chill. I know this is your old way of seeing things, but chill. And I kind of think there needs to be an interaction between them again when it comes to stuff like that. So hopefully it didn't sound bad saying there needs to be more of it, but narrative-wise, let's continue.
After this brief exchange, the rest of RWBY approaches, and while it's clear that they want to comment on that small little back and forth, they refrain, instead launching straight into a group hug composed of Ruby and Yang. Blake abstains, which Weiss seems to appreciate considering how irritated she is by the two sisters squeezing her to death. She greets them back, hugging them back almost against her will before presenting the three with gifts she got while in Atlas. An organizer binder for Ruby, high-end Atlesian shampoo and conditioner for Yang, and a copy of Third Crusade for Blake, a book that Blake had lost long before arriving at Beacon and had never picked up another copy of. There would be some small sweet
Pause, okay. Third Crusade. It's an interesting book for her to give, considering that I think that's the name of the book that Mercury and Emerald asked Tuscan for. Just pointing that out real fast. Let's continue.
Dialogue between them to establish that the two have managed to bond since the incident at the end of Season 1, though the bond is still somewhat strained. There's an understanding and some respect, but there's still plenty of room to grow. Blake is pleased and suggests they head to the cafeteria after they get settled back into their dorm, saying that Nora and Ren were planning on doing the same once John and Pyrrha got situated. Excited, Ruby spurs on the plan and rushes everyone off to their room so they can see their friends sooner. As they leave, in the background, we have the first appearance of Team Season. Not Team Sun, who are complaining about how one of their members, Sun Wukong, ditched them before they left Mistral. They all hope their teachers manage to track him down, and they all agree to give him an earful when he finally gets to Vale. Now we finally cut to an event from the original episode, that being the cafeteria scene, and the majority of this is left completely untouched, though the bit with Weiss's binder is switched from a fourth wall breaking Nixon reference to an amazement over Ruby filling the binder Weiss gave her with best day ever ideas in such a short turnaround. There are some other small tweaks.
Pause, okay. I'm just throwing it out there. The Nixon reference definitely needed to be done away with. That felt awkward and weird when I went back and rewatched that. That was just weird. Either way, let's continue.
Like changing Ruby's line about students arriving from other schools to fit with the fact that no students arrived at Beacon for the previous semester. Additionally, instead of Sun and Neptune walking in on the fight, it's Coco and Velvet, who are instead talking about anxiety over 2 training missions they're going to need to go on near the end of the semester. Coco will, of course, be the one to get covered in food at the end of this, because she's the chic one. The fight itself remains as fun and goofy as it originally did in the main show, and it does a great job of showcasing all of Ruby and Juniper's talents. But in particular, when Pyrrha polarizes all of the cans in the room, there's a brief cut to Cinder outside the hall pausing to look in and watch for a brief moment, surprised to see Pyrrha's semblance. But other than that small addition, the scene continues as it did before, ominous Ozpin statements and all, and we fade out to the episode's stinger scene with Torchwick. Instead of getting a confrontation scene between Roman and Cinder, we instead get to see the end of a successful death theft by the members of the White Fang. Roman seems to be the man in charge, and he shares some words with the actual White Fang leader present, the lieutenant, who expresses his surprise and respect over how efficiently Roman operated. Roman, ignoring the low expectations, preens his feathers over the compliment and adds a self-deprecating remark that so long as children stayed out of the picture, he can work wonders. He gives his own compliment back to Lieutenant about the efficacy of the White Fang troops, remarking how much work could be done when the workforce he had was actually competent. The Lieutenant waxes back that motivation other than greed is a powerful tool, and Roman disagrees, though he clarifies that there's more than one kind of greed in the world, and that selfish desires can work wonders towards motivating a man. The episode ends as they board a bullhead with their troops and take off. Episode 2 starts with
balls. Okay, so there's episode 1. As I said in the last volume that we were in, and when we saw Roman we saw that the real White Fang was coming and found them. And I said, you know, knowing Roman, he would find a way to get out of there. So obviously with his little silver tongue, he did. And one key thing missing with that scene, unless by some weird chance I missed it, one key thing that was missing was Neo. I didn't see Neo in that little scene, so maybe something happened there. I don't know. I don't know. Either way, one way to find out. Let's continue.
Ruby enacting her best day ever, dragging all of Team RWBY, Juniper, and Coffee off to do a number of fun, silly things on campus, such as playing a whole host of video games, a scavenger hunt around the school, outdoor sports, and finally a cookout in the evening. Sprinkled through this are a number of odd character combinations to really establish that everyone involved are friends or are on their way to becoming friends. A few good examples of this are Ruby teaching Weiss how to rollerblade, making jibes that she can fight in heels but can't handle a pair of skates, Coco and Pyrrha talking about some of the latest fashion that Pyrrha modeled over the break, and Yang and Ren cooking the dinner. The picnic itself is happening not too far from Beacon's docks, so when a supply ship touches down, it's not a surprise that the majority of the cast happen to catch sight of Sun Wukong jumping from the ship and being chased by guards. We go through the whole great stowaway routine and Sun makes a break for the school. Cardin, passing by, saw the whole scene unfold and does his best brick wall impression by blocking Sun and catching him, which gives the guards enough time to catch up. Sun, seeing Cardin in school uniform, asks if Cardin is a huntsman in training like him, saying that if Cardin is, they're both on the same side, trying to appeal to Cardin's sense of camaraderie in a bid to get free. Cardin ain't having any of that shit, and as the guards arrive, they thank Cardin for catching the flea bag, opening the floor for a slur of slurs from themselves and Cardin, who joins in the taunting. When Sun tries to resist against Cardin's grip, Cardin punches him in response, knocking him to the ground. Sun, surprised, doesn't run away and tries to talk his way out of the situation since running away didn't work the first time. However, the guards hover over him and begin to beat him into the ground, getting a few good kicks in as Cardin watches apathetically. Sun, between his aura and his training, takes the beating in stride and tries to talk them down calmly even as they slap him with their noodly legs. The majority of our protagonists watch this unfold, and Blake, triggered, stomps forward to confront them, punching one of the guards and knocking him out cold with his aura flailing and failing out. She's about to punch the other one when Yang manages to get a hold of her and pull her back, and shortly afterwards Blake calms, realizing what she's done. She's horrified she did something so terrible and is stunned to silence. The other guard calls Blake crazy just as Ruby steps—
Pause, hold up. She's stunned that she did something so terrible, so she stopped somebody from beating somebody up. She stopped a cop, essentially, from beating up Sun for essentially nothing. So you just... why would she be stunned that she did that? For me, that don't make sense. But, you know, maybe... for me, it don't make sense. I don't even have words. I mean, and just that... for me, that scene is... I get introducing Sun somehow, but I don't want to sound harsh, but I don't like it. You got cops, pretty much essentially cops or security, whatever you want to call them, coming over and just starting to beat on him. I mean, yeah, he was a stowaway, but just to beat him and kick him, and I get that he's a faunus, but no, that for me this just doesn't make sense as an introduction. And I mean, yeah, it makes sense for Cardin to block the way and kind of, you know, be that obstacle for him to try to get by. That part, okay, makes sense. I like it, but why couldn't they just capture him and just haul him off? And he just gets out with like a warning or something later. And that's how he can come back and be with, you know, the rest of, you know, all our Team RWBY and Juniper and all of them. I don't understand the whole, let's just beat them down introduction. Yes, that's what got Blake over there to them and the rest of Team RWBY, but, well, not Weiss, but... I don't know, maybe I'm missing something there, but it just kind of felt odd. I don't know. Either way, like I said, I'm not trying to knock it, but it just didn't strike a chord with me, I guess. Let's continue.
to defuse the situation, taking command and responsibility as Blake's team leader. RWBY explains that Sun is a huntsman problem and that Team RWBY will take him to Ozpin. The remaining guard asks about her dealing with Blake, as Blake did kind of commit aggravated assault, to which Yang replies, "What about her?" while slamming her fists together. Safe to say, the guard drags his buddy off and doesn't bother them again. Cardin turns to RWBY, frowning, and lays down he will personally take Sun to Ozpin, and instead of arguing, RWBY volunteers to go with him, so she and the rest of the team can keep an eye on Cardin's behavior. We cut to Ozpin's office.
Balls. Okay. So, like I said, I did like the aspect of Cardin being in the mix, but yeah, the whole guards, they were just guards, and they're just randomly being racist and just starting to beat on them. I'm not going to harp on that, but interesting dynamic with Cardin and, well, it looks like now the rest of Team RWBY. But I thought RWBY was just going to go with Cardin alone, and I was going to say that sounds like an interesting dynamic to have between them, but looks like everybody's in there. Team RWBY, Cardin, Sun, Ozpin, and for some reason I cannot remember her name. Crap. Can't get it in my head, but I know it has something to do with Wizard of Oz. Darn it. Either way, I'm not going to harp on that either. Let's continue. I was thinking about RWBY and Cardin in, the dynamic between them, but oh well. Looks like everybody's here.
Where Sun is getting a proper reprimand from Glinda, while Ozpin addresses the rest of the students that accompanied him. After he thanks them, Cardin raises the issue of Blake assaulting the dock guard, and RWBY comes to her defense, laying out the full scope of the situation. Ozpin briefly calls RWBY's side of the case into question, not accusingly so, just trying to make sure she's not bending the truth or leaving out details to defend her teammate, as many leaders would. Weiss surprises everyone by speaking up to support RWBY's account of events, and Weiss's rather pristine reputation for honesty, blunt honesty, but honesty nonetheless, gives Ozpin all he needs. Giving Blake a
balls. Okay, so we already had the interaction between Ozpin and Weiss, and Ozpin didn't have, I don't know how to say it, Ozpin and Weiss didn't necessarily have the best, most cordial conversation, because Weiss was questioning Ozpin on whether or not he made a mistake making RWBY team lead. So yes, she was very honest in that exchange with him in the beginning, so maybe that's what he's remembering, is her honesty in the moment, and that's why here in Volume 2 he's thinking, oh, she's very honest, I'll go ahead and believe her. I feel like there's like a, I don't know, I feel like something like that could have been like, in my head, the way it could have been, I'm not, like I said, I'm not criticizing. They did it the way they felt the need to do it, so it is what it is. But a way to do that would have been for Ozpin to be thinking to himself, last semester, me and her had a back and forth about whether or not I made the mistake of making RWBY the team lead, but here she is standing behind her team lead now. Maybe I didn't make a mistake, and obviously what is being said here is true. Something along that lines would have made a little more sense than saying Ozpin knowing how truthful she is. I don't know. Either way, hindsight 2020, so it is what it is. Let's continue.
Very knowing look, he says he understands the situation and can turn a blind eye in this circumstance. He asks that Blake, her teammates, and Cardin all take care to watch their behavior in public from now on and take into consideration how their actions reflect back on Beacon Academy. Cardin is none too pleased, especially since Ozpin's statement comes off as a veiled reprimand of Cardin as well. He slams his fist on the Ozpin's desk, asking how he was supposed to know Sun was a student. For all he knew, Sun was just another one of those crazy White Fang fanatics from Vale trying to hide under everyone's noses. There's a lot of equipment worth stealing at a Huntsman Academy, and Cardin doesn't want Beacon to wind up like one of the other dozen shops that have already been hit. This sets off a couple of alarms for our protagonist, who thought they managed to curb that particular problem last season, only for Cardin to tell them to crack open a newspaper from time to time before he storms out of the room. The next scene happens the following day with a congregation of all the students in Beacon's main auditorium. Of course, all the
Beacon students are here in attendance, but so is a large contingent of students from a number of different academies, including Team Season, who are still berating Sun for ditching them as they walk into the room. When things settle, Ozpin welcomes the students back from break, as well as all the temporary students from Shade and Haven they would be housing for the upcoming Vital Festival tournament. He briefly explains that due to weather, Atlas's students will be arriving later that day, and continues on with a speech about cooperation between kingdoms, understanding between cultures, and peace worldwide, emphasizing that not focusing on these goals would only lead to the same disastrous conflicts that mar Remnant's history. This is effectively the first half of his speech from the end of the volume, cut and pasted here as an entrance ceremony instead of some strange, out-of-place preamble to students going off to fight their missions. All the same, when he says his last line about historical conflicts, Blake tightens her hand, crumpling a newspaper she was reading before the speech started. The following episode is pretty much the same as the original Welcome to Beacon episode, though with some very minor changes. We still open with the conversation between Ironwood and Ozpin, the tension over Atlas's fleet being present, and as an extra touch, having Ironwood mention Ozpin's role as head of Vital Festival security, justifying his whole fleet as an additional resource to be at Ozpin's disposal. RWBY's board game is relatively inoffensive and just needs minor tweaks to establish both Sun and Neptune as new friends, with Sun strolling around to thank them for helping him when he arrived. The team is good-natured about it, though Weiss does scold him a little for breaking the law just to get to school on time. Sun takes this in stride while laughing it off, and in fact, this is where Neptune and Weiss somewhat hit it off, putting jibes and jokes in Sun's side. Blake, having been distant the whole game, goes back to the dorm. This is of course where Blake flashes back to her little chat with Ozpin, and the only serious tweak we're making here is having Ozpin distinguish that students either get into Beacon with transcripts from a registered Huntsman feeder school, or by taking an intensive exam, opening a way for students outside the kingdoms or unable to attend certain schools to get their footing in a Huntsman program. Other than that, the scene continues unchanged. This is then followed by Blake.
Pause, okay. I don't know if it'll make it on the pausing screen that I've got for y'all, because I might be a millisecond or so off, but that was a crazy pause scene right there. Nonetheless, so, yes, okay, I was in the back of my mind thinking about, you know, Blake and Ozpin's discussion, because I do remember Ozpin and her having a discussion, and Ozpin's just like, hey, look, why are you wearing that stupid bow? I know he didn't say it that way, but essentially that's what he said. Hey, take the stupid bow off. You know, you don't have to hide. But that's why earlier, when Cardin was talking to Ozpin in that office, that goes back to that, in my opinion, because she told him in the original, and, you know, he says that it's going to play out primarily the same, so essentially we get Blake telling him, look, I want people to know who I am, not what I am. So essentially she wants to be judged on her merits and who she is, as opposed to, oh, I'm a faunus. And going back to the scene where, you know, Cardin was talking about, for all I know, it could have been the White Fang and all this and that. And with that scene in there, it helps also with this little back and forth between Ozpin and Blake, because whenever she's talking about how she wears the bow so that she can protect her identity because of people like Cardin judging her and believing the worst of her, as opposed to just believing the best. So I feel like that Cardin scene actually serves a pretty good purpose. So yeah, nothing else to add there. Let's continue. And
being confronted by the rest of Team RWBY, swapping out Weiss's chair shenanigans for a more heart-to-heart moment where Weiss ties in how being friends with Blake has made her question how she treats others, and how Blake should give her team a little trust with her anxieties. Blake comes clean about being anxious over the whole White Fang stealing dust thing again, worried that since they never found his body, Roman escaped to begin peddling his cover stories again, and RWBY rallies them all to investigate. RWBY of course realizes she left her board game in the library and rushes off to retrieve it, running headlong into Cinder, Mercury, and Emerald, and two unnamed unimportant students from Haven, with Cinder posing as the group's teacher and chaperone. The exchange happens much as it did in the original volume. There's a shift in direction in order to portray the three as much less menacing. Remember, the audience haven't met these characters yet outside of seeing Cinder back at the cafeteria in episode 1, so playing them off as just another group of students and potential allies will set up a nice, gentle twist for a few episodes down the line that'll set the audience off kilter. Of course, making Cinder look less try-hard menacing might be a little bit tricky, but that's what we have concept artists and character modelers for. Episode 4 is the start of the investigation mini-arc.
Pause. Okay, hold on. Didn't we Well, no, 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 no. Never mind what I was about to say, because in the opening scene of the very first episodes, I can't remember if he did it the same way or not. I believe he did, but we had Cinder fighting Glinda and Ruby with glyphs. I'm thinking of probably the original Ruby right here, but Cinder, yeah, I think he changed that in Fixing RWBY. So I was about to say something about, wait, we've already been introduced to Cinder with the fight at the beginning of the first volume in like episode 1, but no, I don't think he kept that in there. And even if he did keep it in there, Cinder was in the shadows the entire time. So we technically wouldn't even knew about her then. So with her presenting herself as a chaperone right here to our blind eyes, we wouldn't know anything different if this is the real volume and real official thing that happened. So I actually like the idea of us not knowing who Cinder is right away, and she's just a twist villain later on. Because in this version, right now, in our mindset, without knowing anything, we got to keep this in mind. Cinder is just a chaperone. Mercury and Emerald, plus 2 other nobody students, are just, they're just students from another school, supposedly. So right now, if we were watching this as it's being written here, we wouldn't know nothing else about them. So, in my opinion, now that I see where he's going with this, not starting with Mercury and Emerald at the beginning with Tuscan is definitely a good idea, because it subverts our expectations about these characters. And then later on, we're going to see and be like, I like them. Now I don't, because they're villains. So, good job with that.
We have the scene in Port's class to establish John's first real failure to woo Weiss, the team prepping for their investigation proper, and Sun and Neptune bursting in on them. There are 2 significant tweaks here, with Blake planning to confer with Tuxin over where a White Fang meeting might be taking place, and a little added dialogue to pad Sun's justification for tagging along. Remember, he and Neptune are only sort of friends with Team RWBY at this point, so we need to use some of Sun's charming but pushy nature from back in Volume 1 to get them properly integrated with the team. This is also the point where Sun confirms his suspicions that Blake is a funness, and his laid-back attitude win him the chance to pair off with her, especially since he doesn't mind beating up, quote, crazy cultist jerks, unquote. Weiss then drills over Neptune and the teams pair off to go where they need. When we arrive with Ruby and Weiss to the tower, the discussion is tweaked to change some of the lore for logical reasons. No longer are they going to the tower because Ruby just thought it was cool, but the Schnee Dust Company actually invested in its construction and has a permanent presence on one of its floors, an effective Schnee-themed palette swap of the communication floor we saw in the original show. This allows her to access not just digital, but also physical files to supplement her research and gives her proper justification for going to the physical location. Otherwise, their conversation is the same. They run into Penny, and Ruby ditches Weiss in order to figure out what's up with her. Weiss goes through her whole phone call routine, gets access to all the documents she needs, and gives her sister the cold shoulder, all while Ruby and Penny discuss what happened after the incident with Torchwick. Penny explains that this was her first time to a different kingdom, and while her dad was happy she was doing so well socializing, her getting involved in stopping a dust robbery kinda set off some alarms, so he had her taken back to Atlas for a brief spell. We'll later learn more, but effectively she was allowed to return so long as she had proper supervision. Supervision that mandated she not associate with any of Team RWBY. And when Ruby herself inquires as to who told Penny not to talk to them, that's when we get the scene with Ironwood and his spiffy new robots. Cue Penny being spotted and running, and the guards giving chase, and Ruby going all Prince of Persia, Sonic edition, just before getting hit by the delivery truck. Penny saves Ruby, and the episode ends on the reveal of Penny's robotic nature. The investigation arc
balls. Okay, so she shows off. So in this version, does she get hit by the truck and it kind of scratches her up and that's how she's revealed? Or does she do like in the actual, volume 2 and just tells Ruby, okay, Ruby, I'm not a real person. I'm a robot. And then, of course, then Ruby's like, no, you're more than a robot. Well, there's more to Penny than just being a robot. She's the first synthetic robot that can have her own aura and all that stuff. So, yeah. And then, of course, Ruby goes off and talks to her about how, oh no, you're more than that. You know, you got thoughts, you got ideas, you got, you know, you're more than just a robot, blah, 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 you're a person. So I guess in this version, it shows off, the crash shows off maybe some of her metallic spots, and that's how Ruby finds out. But I know in the original, she finds out by Penny literally just saying, look, I'm not a real girl. So in this version, though, if it's the truck hitting her and exposing some of her, that's a little better, because if the truck hit her in the original, there should have been some sort of damage to her, showing off that she's a robot. Either way.
Continues in episode 5 by capping off the Ruby Penny conversation, getting Penny removed from the equation for the upcoming fight. After coming through the scene a couple of times, I don't think there's anything offensive that needs removal or tweaking, so I'm fine with letting it stand still. I'd personally fix some of the, let's say, less than stellar acting, but that applies to this whole season, and considering our theoretical framework for fixing this whole series, it would have been bad regardless. Maybe I do better directing the actors than Miles, Carey, or Monty, but this is one area of expertise I don't feel comfortable commenting on until I get my own original audio work completed. The next scene is all new, with Blake and Sun visiting Tucson to get a bead on the pulse of the White.
Hold on, let me go back. Until he gets his own audio work completed? Maybe I need to search through his channel and find out whether or not he's got that completed, because I know this was done years ago. So maybe he's got some stuff he's done. Either way, I'll go and check that later, and y'all do it as well. Obviously, I'll leave links down in the description below for the link to this original video that we're watching, so you can get to his channel through that, because obviously watching it with me and all my pausing is not going to make it enjoyable unless you've already watched it. So go over there and watch all of his Fixing RWBY before you watch this with me. Let's continue and play.
Fang. Since he's part of a miniature underground railroad out of the organization, he knows where meetings are planned to set up, and even helps organize a few people on the inside who try to deter new recruits. All the same, he tells them where the newest meeting is and to be careful. All throughout this exchange, there's some warm dialogue with Blake introducing Sun and the three conversing about casual affairs. There's a particular instance where Sun wants to prove he's literate by naming one of his favorite books, only to realize his mouth ran off without him and it's actually a children's book. Tucson laughs, of course, good-natured as he is, and mentions he's familiar with it, that it's a good one, and he lent it out to a friend for her kid to read. He has a habit of lending books out like that. With their business concluded, Blake and Sun leave the shop. Meanwhile, with Yang and Neptune, they arrived at Junior's club and shake him down for information. The setup is almost completely unchanged, but the substance of the conversation is quite different. While there's still a remark about the men that Torchwick hired from Junior never coming back, we get confirmation that Torchwick himself is very much rumored to be alive amongst the underbelly of Vale, especially given the most recent dust steps that seem to have a signature MO. The strange thing, though, is that it's still technically just rumors. He hasn't been in touch with any of his normal associates, and he hasn't recruited any men from his normal sources, meaning that if he was able to pull off some of these heists, it's because someone is bankrolling him and providing the manpower. With nothing left to gain from Junior, Yang and Neptune leave. The latter half of the episode is when Blake and Sun go to the White Fang rally, and this, like many other moments, is almost completely untouched, other than an increase in prominence for the White Fang lieutenant, who is on stage at all times, even if he's just kind of tucked off to the side when Roman steals the show. We increase attention when Blake recognizes him, briefly flashing back to a moment when the man was standing beside Adam, giving the audience a quick and abridged association that we can latch onto in order to increase the anxiety. Likewise, when the crowd starts moving, we don't cut away to the Yang and Neptune scene, since you know it's finished, and we don't lose that narrative flow or the tension that's been mounting throughout this whole rally. Finally, Roman and Neo seem to slowly recognize Blake amongst the crowd, only for the lieutenant to
Balls. Okay. So, what I was thinking earlier about Neo not being there, now Neo's here, so cool, everything's still straight with her. Now, that does put it to me, since we're using screenshots and videos from the original volume as opposed to the fan artwork, that does tell me that in the original RWBY, that Neo was introduced to us in Volume 2 as opposed to Volume 3. For some reason, Volume 3 was stuck in my head. But then again, it was stuck in my head that Neo was the one that cut off Yang's arm when that was Adam. Thank you for pointing that out to me. I haven't watched the series proper in so flippin' long, which is one good thing about going through this is with me starting the volume, I'm now going through the original actual series as well again and doing this all proper, which makes it where I'm getting that much more familiar with everything again. And I'm hoping that I'll actually have everything rewatched by the time we get to volume 10. Granted, I don't know when we're ever going to get a volume 10. Come on, Viz Media. But hopefully we get it, and I'll be caught up again, even with Fixing RWBY on volume 10. Either way, let's continue and play.
Step forward and recognize her most clearly. Blake and Sun, realizing their situation, start scrambling for their weapons. When the lieutenant screams Blake's name, the scene goes dark, and the episode ends. Episode 6 is the culmination of the investigation arc and is primarily a long series of action sequences. With their identities being revealed, Blake and Sun draw their weapons, the White Fang members that are present being to close in through the crowd, while all of the fresh recruits are confused and somewhat alarmed. Blake, thinking quickly, tells Sun to close his eyes and loads her pistol with electrical dust, shooting the room's power breaker to make the warehouse's lights burn out in a bright flash. Faunus, having good night vision, logically have a sensitivity to sharp lighting and are momentarily blinded, and the fact that all the lights go out afterwards means everyone but Sun and Blake will need time to adapt to the settling darkness. Roman and Neo are especially disoriented, seeing as they're both human. Blake and Sun jump up to the catwalk and begin fighting their way down it, this being the first appearance of Sun's gunchucks, and tell me the image of him walking his way down a catwalk with those things against a stream of White Fang isn't amusing. During this confusion, several recruits run for the—
Pause. Okay, I'm only pausing just to say the gunchucks might be the best weapon. Just saying.
The exit, at a loss for how to handle the situation, though a small smattering stayed to help. Eventually, the two of them are back to one of the windows of the room, with Roman finally regaining coherence and strapping into the Paladin just as the lieutenant approaches them to attack. Blake manages to hit an emergency button on her scroll as the lieutenant lunges at them, and the two barely manage to fend him off. Torchwick charges forward in the Paladin, and since we've established that everyone started running off, there's no need to question whether or not he just trampled a room full of people he was trying to recruit. Blake and Sun leap out the window, and seconds later they're followed by Roman and his Paladin. We cut back to Ruby, who has rejoined Weiss at the CCT and is trying to help her sort through some of the documents, though all she's really accomplishing is being a lovable doof. Weiss seems frustrated by Ruby's antics, but also a little endeared by them. That's when they get the emergency beacon that Blake sent out for both of them to snap to attention. They check where it's coming from and they see that it's on the move from a different part of town. Weiss is distraught over how far that is and how they'll never be able to clear that distance. Ruby, however, asks if Weiss has lightning dust loaded in Myrtenmaster. When Weiss nods, Ruby smiles and we cut to them outside with Weiss on Ruby's back. With a prayer that Ruby's plan will work, Weiss combines the dust with her glyphs and makes a haste glyph like the one we saw used on Blake in the original version of the Paladin fight, making Ruby even faster. Combining that with her speed semblance, Ruby and Weiss are off like lightning, with Weiss comedically holding on for dear life and swearing she's never listening to one of Ruby's plans again. Over to Yang and Neptune, Yang also receives a distress call and notes how close it is. She's also worried over how much aura it looks like Blake is expending. Given how fast the tracker is showing them moving, she guesses Blake and Sun must be pushing their aura to outrun something. Neptune, looking over her shoulder, blinks and points to the dot, saying, "Hey, isn't that corner?" just as Blake, Sun, and the Paladin streak down the road past them. Yang throws on her helmet and Neptune hops on behind her and the two give chase. We catch up with Blake and Sun, who are somewhat winded from running, but keep pushing, their auras glowing around them very faintly so we can tell that they're using that to keep pace ahead of the Paladin. The chase happens as it did before, though now we have Yang getting on a scroll call.
Pause. Okay, so I felt like I was just letting it kind of play without saying anything there for a minute, so I'm kind of just pausing and kind of slowly catch my thoughts, as well as read this. Kind of like this, but with more horizontal movement. No, not that kind. No, not that kind. Okay. Okay. Nonetheless, though, I had to stop, kind of collect my thoughts and be like, okay, if there was this much going on in the city, granted, I know how it went in the original volume, considering that we're using footage from the volume, but wouldn't there be, considering Ironwood especially is in town, wouldn't they kind of have somebody there already to kind of catch what's going on and to alleviate this problem? Especially Ironwood, considering he could look at this and be like, oh, this is a good situation for me to be able to test out whether or not these, robots that I've got could actually work. But yeah, I'm just let's let everything just go haywire. in the middle of the streets. Whatever. Either way, it's just a thought that was running through my head. It has nothing to do with any writing or anything like that. It's just in my head that Ironwood could have solved this problem quickly. Either way, let's continue.
With Ruby and Weiss, getting them up to speed on what's chasing Blake and Sun. We can even have Weiss trying desperately to juggle holding onto Ruby and holding onto her scroll. We see Ruby drop Weiss off on the overpass she winds up jumping off of at the end of the chase. Ruby speeds down below the overpass to set up for the rest of the team's arrival, and we fall into much the same fight as the Paladin fight in the original volume, only now with a few small touches to indicate that yes, this Paladin itself is a prototype and has a number of faulty features, most prominent being the laser targeting being disrupted by Weiss's fog. The fight ends much the same, with minor tweaks to show there's a little history between Yang and Neo now when she appears, and instead set up that Yang is the one who makes the joke about their plans falling apart, albeit somewhat self-deprecatingly. This is where Weiss accidentally lets out a small chuckle over the joke, which she is quick to try and cover up as police lights close in from the distance. We cut to Sun and Neptune at the
Pause really fast. There's the police lights. That's what I was waiting on, considering all the commotion happening in the streets. So, yeah, okay, so they did finally show up, and let's continue.
noodle stand, wonder briefly how this old guy has so many jobs, and the episode ends. Thank you for watching Section 1 of Fixing RWBY Part 4. I'd love to give a big shout out to all of my wonderful patrons who have each helped this channel grow into what it is today. If you want to support the channel, please consider donating at patreon.com/Celtic Phoenix. Remember, by donating $1 or more, you can get access to the Team Frostbite Discord server, where personalities like myself, Fatman Falling, and Tom Horan of Six Slick Productions regularly interact with our supporters. Please stick around for the next installment, and I'll catch you all on the flip side.
Okay, and yes, I was letting, well, pretty much I was letting him promote himself, because, of course, he's the one doing this, so I want to give him the credit where, credit where credit's due. I say that a lot. So yes, there's a few changes in there that are definitely good. Oh wait, no, it's auto playing on me, so I have to flip that over so I don't ruin myself for, I know this is extremely early as of recording this, but what started playing in the background was the Christmas special that I'm wanting to watch with everybody as a Christmas thing for Christmas of 2026. Like I said, as I'm recording it, this is like February 5th, but I've already got it ready to watch. Nonetheless, heck, I might do that throughout the year, and just either way. That's a whole nother matter for a whole nother time. Yes, I do feel like the Weiss standing up for Ruby and Ozpin kind of like, oh, I know how much she's usually a truth teller. I'm going to sit back and believe what she's saying, as opposed to, I really felt like that one could have been more like, I had a discussion with her not long ago about whether or not she believes Ruby was the right choice for team lead, but now I'm sitting here listening to her back her team lead up. I'm going to believe this, considering the trouble that they started with. So I felt like that could have been worked a little bit different, but, like I always say, I'm not the one doing it, so I don't want to feel like I'm being judgmental or like critical or whatever. I'm sitting here going through all this, kind of just sharing my thoughts as it's happening, because that's my first time watching and listening to any of that. So what this is literally me just giving my first initial thoughts and impressions right after hearing something for the very first time, as opposed to watching it and then writing out a script of a response and being like overly critical and this and that. Sometimes in the comment section, I could read something and be like, you know what? That's a good idea. That's a good thought. In fact, Celtic Phoenix, I can't get words out of my mouth. It's been a long, long day of driving today, by the way. Celtic Phoenix, in fact, he sometimes actually posts comments underneath some of these. So, hey, he's changed my mind a little bit on one of his, comments. I made a comment about, what was it? I made a comment about I can't remember fully, but I know it has something to possibly do with Jean. It had something to do with Jean and how he handled, standing up to Cardin when it came to Velvet and stuff. I know he said something about that, and I was kind of like, you know what? I could see that now since you explained yourself. And of course, I did say in that reply, please don't take me as saying anything critical and you have to feel like you got to defend yourself or anything like that. By all means, I'm not doing that. But either way, yes, sometimes, once in a blue moon, when he does find the time, I'm sure just like everybody else in life, everyone's busy. Every one of these videos is an hour long. I don't expect people to be able to sit through all of this. So, nonetheless, though, whenever he does find time, though, he seems to come on over here and type something out. And, like I said, he changed. I do read these comments, and sometimes I might not reply back, but I do leave that heart. If I don't reply back, I do leave a heart so that everyone knows that I did see the comment. So now if I don't, if it's an insult of a comment, which very rarely do I get those, but I will heart it, then I'll take the heart away. I leave the heart real fast just to give that notification to them to make sure people know I've seen it. But then I take the heart away and just ignore the comment and let them ruminate in that, like, oh, he's seen it, but he didn't reply. Darn. I didn't get what I wanted. I didn't get the reply. And that's what people that leave those kind of comments want, as a reply, but I just don't reply. Honestly, I'm going to tell y'all the truth. I don't even know where my afterthoughts are going with this. So I'm kind of like, should I end it here, or should I figure out where I was going, where I was originally? Oh yeah, that's where I was at earlier. I told y'all at the very, very, very beginning, a little hyper tonight, so my brain is kind of just like 15 different directions, in case y'all are wondering why I'm not making no sense here in my afterthoughts. But that was my only real critique, is about the whole Ozpin and Weiss, exchange there. That's my only real critique. Other than that, though, I do ultimately like one of the best changes made was I didn't like it at first until I saw where we were going. But not getting it introduced to Mercury and Emerald at the very beginning, I didn't like that at first. But then I saw where we were going. I was like, oh, okay, now I like this. Yes, I know it's going to be hard for me in the back of my mind to be like, oh, I don't know who these people are. But that's why I say, if we were watching it as this is being written, we wouldn't even know who Mercury and, Emerald are. We would know vaguely who Cinder might be, but she was in the shadows. We didn't see her at the end of Volume 1, technically, if we're going with this version. So the idea of, hey, yeah, Cinder is a chaperone. These are just students from another school. In our head, that's what we got to remember, is that's the change that I like. That's a good change. So when we get to Tuscan, and we've been familiarized with him from the changes from Volume 1, now it's going to actually hit hard when they start asking him about such and such and this, and then all of a sudden, Tuscan's not there no more. So who did what? And then Cinder gets on to them for doing what they did. Then it's going to start hitting us like, oh my gosh, what the frick? So I like the change of us, putting ourselves in the perspective of, we don't know who these people are. These are just students. I like that change. That was a really good change. Other than that, I don't think there was nothing wrong with, like I said, I'm not being critical about the whole Ozpin Weiss thing. It's a nitpick. Nothing can be perfect. So it is what it is. Nonetheless, though, I need to shut up. I've got like 5 minutes left for my time that I'm going to get to myself, and I've got to call the wife, because right now for me, it is 8:55 at night, and at 9 o'clock, I call the wife, talk to her, then we fall asleep together on the phone. Yes, we are still that couple. I'm on the road Monday through Friday. I fall asleep with her. She probably rolls over in the middle of the night. She hangs the phone up, all that stuff. But yes, we are that couple, and I got 5 minutes to call her. get comfortable, all that good stuff. So either way, y'all know the drill by now. If you've been with me this long, hit that like, tickle to subscribe if you're new. Don't be texting and driving. Watch what you love and love what you watch. And take it away, Mr. Rogers.
I like you just the way you are.